When my uncle Augusto passed away, it was as if an old link in our family had been broken. He was the only one who still lived in our family's old country house, a worn wooden building surrounded by trees and the heavy silence of the countryside. I always thought the house was a bit gloomy, even when I was a kid and we went on vacation there. Now as sole heiress, it was up to me to arrange it for sale. It wasn't something I did for pleasure, but out of necessity. My life at the time wasn't easy. Piling up debts and a recent divorce left me with little choice. So on a cold March morning, I grabbed my rubber gloves, some boxes, and went to stare into the rooms full of memories that weren't mine. The cleaning was going well until I got to the basement. I vaguely remembered that place, but it always seemed to me a simple space, with just a few shelves and old things. As I walked down the stairs, I smelled a peculiar smell of damp wood mixed with something stronger, something I couldn't immediately identify. The walls were peeling, and the dim light of a lamp hanging from the ceiling made the room even more depressing. It was then that I noticed something I had never noticed before. A dark wooden door in the far corner. It was locked with a large lock, which seemed to have been there for decades. That didn't make sense to me. I had vacationed there for years, but I'd never noticed that door. Curiosity began to grow inside me like an itch impossible to ignore. Why was that door locked? And more importantly, what was behind it? After searching in vain for a key everywhere, I decided I had no time to waste. I grabbed a hammer I found on one of the shelves and started striking the rusty lock. It wasn't easy. Each beat seemed to echo through the entire house, as if something didn't want to be disturbed. When I finally managed to break it, my heart was racing. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a room that had seemed untouched for years. The air inside was heavy and smelled musty, but it was what I saw that really paralyzed me for a moment. The room was small and claustrophobic, lit only by the light that escaped from the basement. There was an old wooden table covered with yellowed papers and scattered notes, all written in irregular handwriting. The walls were covered with old photos of my family, some that I recognized, but others, they were strange. People I had never seen before, but who seemed to know very well who we were. In the center of the table was an old tape recorder, the kind my uncle would never have used. He seemed out of place there, as if he were a visitor in a house full of memories that did not belong to him. As uncomfortable as it was, something inside me said that I needed to understand what it was all about. I picked up the tape recorder carefully, almost afraid that it would fall apart in my hands. There was a tape already inserted, and the play button looked worn, as if it had been used countless times. I took a deep breath before pressing the button, and the sound that came out made me freeze. It was a distorted, scratched voice, as if it had been recorded in precarious conditions. The message didn't make sense at first, disjointed sentences and strange noises until one word became clear: danger. The voice repeated that several times, each time quieter, until it disappeared for good, leaving only the sound of the rolls spinning. My stomach churned as I tried to process what I had just heard. Was that some kind of joke? Would my uncle have left it there on purpose? Before I could think too much, I was pulled out of my reveries by a sound. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a low, almost imperceptible noise, but then it came again, louder, scratches. They seemed to come from behind the walls. My eyes scanned the room, and for a moment I had the feeling that the photos on the wall were different. Something about the way the people in the images seemed to look at me. The feeling of being watched began to take over me, and the sound of scratches seemed to be getting closer. I swallowed hard and tried to convince myself that it was just some animal stuck in the walls, a mouse perhaps. But deep down I knew that this was not normal. The scratches were rhythmic, as if someone was trying to get my attention. I decided to leave that room, but when I turned to the door, something made me hesitate. In the middle of the notes, scattered around the table, one of them looked different. I picked it up with trembling hands, and as I unfolded it, I read the message: "Don't listen, don't look, get out." My heart raced, and the words began to swirl in my mind like a warning I should have heard earlier. But it was too late. The scratches were now louder, as if they were right behind me. Without thinking, I ran to the basement, going up the stairs as fast as I could. When I reached the door, the hallway light flickered for a moment before going out completely. The sound of scratches now continued to echo throughout the house. The darkness of the basement seemed to extend beyond what my eyes could reach. I grabbed my phone, shaking, and turned on the flashlight. When I looked back, my blood ran cold. The door I had just broken down was closed again, as if it had never been forced. The scratching sounds had stopped, but now the silence was even more stifling. I felt that there was something there, something that didn't want me to leave. My breath was choppy, and the flashlight of my cell phone trembled in my hand. I decided that I couldn't stay there. I needed to get out of that house. I climbed the remaining steps and tried to open the basement door, but the handle felt stuck, as if something was holding it on the other side. My eyes watered with sheer despair, and the air seemed thicker by the second. I started screaming, trying to shake off the overwhelming feeling that I wasn't alone. Suddenly, a dry noise sounded behind me, as if something had fallen on the basement floor. I turned slowly, illuminating the space with the flashlight, and saw the tape recorder. He was standing in the middle of the basement, even though I had left it on the table. Before I could react, he started playing on his own. The same distorted voice, but now the words were different. "You heard it. You looked. He can't leave." My throat dried up, and a wave of dread washed over me. At the same moment, the light on my cell phone went out and the absolute darkness swallowed me. I tried to light it again, but it didn't work. I felt something around me, a presence that I couldn't see but that I knew was there. The silence was interrupted by a low whisper, close to my ear, almost a hiss. "Stay with me." It was enough to make me kick the door with all the strength I had left, screaming and banging until finally it gave way. When the door finally opened, I stumbled out of the basement, feeling the cold floor of the room under my bare feet. The house looked different. The air was heavier, as if something invisible had settled there watching me. I wasted no time and ran to the front door, but as I turned the handle, it was also locked. I knew I hadn't locked that door. I started, tugging and hitting, panic building as I looked back, fearing what might be following me. It was then that I heard footsteps upstairs. It was no ordinary sound. Every step was slow, deliberate, and made the floorboards creak like a warning. With no other way out, I ran to the kitchen where I knew there was a window that could break. But when I got there, I saw something that paralyzed me. The tape recorder, the same one I had left in the basement and that minutes before was playing, was on the kitchen table. He looked older, almost decomposing, as if he had spent years there. Before I could react, it started playing again, but this time, there was no voice, just the sound of scratches. That sound, so characteristic, seemed to be everywhere now, behind me on the walls, even coming from the window. It was at that moment that I realized that something did not want me to leave that house. My hands trembled as I tried to open the window, but it felt sealed like it was part of the wall. The sound of the scratches kept getting closer and louder, as if something was moving through the walls, getting closer and closer by the second. My chest tightened, and it was hard to breathe, as if the air was being drained from that place. I decided that I could no longer hesitate. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and threw it against the glass, but to my dismay, the window didn't break. The impact echoed through the house, and the scratches suddenly ceased, replaced by a silence that was even worse. It was then that I heard the tape recorder again. He was playing something different this time. A voice, still distorted, said, "My name, Anna." My heart almost stopped. "Anna, you need to stay." The voice sounded clearer now, almost familiar, but the tone carried something deeply wrong, something that made my skin crawl. I looked around, trying to find a way out, anything that would get me out of there. That was when I saw, for the first time, a shadow projecting itself on the kitchen wall. It wasn't mine. She was tall, slender, and moved slowly. Even with her surroundings completely still, I knew at that moment that I was not alone. The shadow seemed to watch me, even without visible eyes. I felt an overwhelming weight in the environment, as if that moment was a carefully planned trap. Stepping back slowly, I kept my eyes fixed on the wall, but something told me that it wasn't tied to its own projection. There was no sound, no movement other than my own. When I took a step back, I tripped over the tape recorder and fell, hitting my shoulder on the ground. The impact took my breath away, but it also caused the tape recorder to be thrown across the kitchen. He hit the wall and stopped playing. For a brief second, absolute silence returned. Before I could get up, I felt something icy touch my ankle. It wasn't a hand, but it felt almost human. The pressure, the texture, everything was strange. I screamed, kicking with all my might, and heard a strange noise like a hiss coming directly from the darkness. Without thinking, I grabbed a knife that was on the countertop and held it with trembling hands. The shadow now moved, clearly approaching, where I stood. It had no definite form, but its presence was almost suffocating. For the first time, I felt that it wasn't just a matter of leaving the house. It was a struggle to get out alive. I got up with difficulty, still holding the knife, and ran into the hallway. The recorder, which until then had been inert on the kitchen floor, went back to playing on its own, now with a deafening sound of mixed voices, screaming my name repeatedly. I didn't look back. I passed through the basement and saw that the door previously locked was open again. From within came a faint pulsating light, almost like the flickering of an old lamp. Against all my instinct, something made me stop. That glow, that sound. It felt like the basement was calling me, pulling every bit of my sanity, but I couldn't give in. Screaming to ward off the fear, I ran into the living room trying to find another way out. That's when I heard footsteps coming from the stairs leading to the second floor. They were heavy, deliberate, and getting closer and closer. My whole body froze and the ground seemed to tilt under my feet. I turned to the front door and, with one last burst of adrenaline, kicked her with all my might. The handle finally gave way and the door opened, throwing me out of the house. When I fell to the lawn, the sound of footsteps stopped. I quickly stood up and looked back, but the door was closed again, as if it had never been forced. I embraced the silence outside, taking a deep breath as I tried to calm the panic that consumed my body. I looked at the house, hoping to see some shadow or any sign that it was still watching me, but all was quiet. The lights in the basement and kitchen were off and the house seemed asleep, as if nothing had happened. My mind kept asking me if I had really lived through it, or if I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I decided never to enter that house again. The next day, I hired a company to empty the place and prepare the sale. I made sure to avoid any mention of the basement or the tape recorder. Just a month later, I got a call from the real estate agent. He seemed hesitant, almost nervous, as he said that the new owners wanted to meet me. I refused, but he continued. They said they found some things with his name on them in the basement. Do you really want me to throw it all away? Yes, was the only thing I could say before I felt my whole body shake and fall to the ground.